What's up guys, Fi here, and today we're going to be looking at patch 4.10. Now 4.10 is a pretty big patch. There are a ton of champion changes, there are also a ton of item changes and a couple of reworks as well, with Nidalee coming into this patch. Now because this is such a big patch and I really don't want to bore you guys and make it a really long video, I'm going to focus more on what the changes actually mean in terms of going into your games rather than reading the changes off for you. So first up then we have the rework to Nidalee, and I'm not going to spend too much time on her in this video. Now the reason is because when someone gets tweaked and reworked like this for every ability, you really need to play the champion to understand what items are good, her playstyle, and what you should kind of be doing in a game. What is her goal and her role now? So rather than really guessing on what I do know, I'd rather just play her a little bit over this weekend and then make a video for you guys next week telling you some tips and tricks and kind of how you play her and her new item build choices as well. Now what I will say is there are two major things that have changed, and that's her passive and her Q. Now a Q doesn't do as much damage anymore, it's not going to nuke you, and thank God for that. And part of that is because the missile width is now halved, so it's going to be harder for her to hit her spears anyway. The passive is a new mechanic called the Hunted, and when you get hit by a Q or W, it's going to mark you. Grants Nidalee vision, she gets movement speed towards you as well, and it kind of gives her new interactions with her Cougar form. So what I will say about what this is going to mean for her is that Bruiser Nidalee is going to be back. Now this means Blade the Ruined King, Iceborne Gauntlet, Randuin's is going to be probably a very good core build on her if you play it like that. And I think AP Nidalee isn't going to be as viable, but she can still be played and she can still win games. So let's move on to the main champion changes that I want to get into, and first up is Skarner. Now they've changed every single ability. I guess it's kind of like another rework for him, what a surprise. So first up we have his passive, and it kind of works like Braum's passive but only for Skarner. Now his basic attacks apply a thing called Crystal Venom, and when the target gets 3 stacks of this, they're going to be stunned and they'll have damage dealt to them. The difference between Braum's passive and this passive is that only Skarner can apply it. So Skarner has to have all 3 of those attacks, and allies can't really help with that at all. Now his W is getting its cooldown reduced, and his E is getting the cooldown and the damage reduced as well. So there are 2 new mechanics that they've added onto his Q, and the first one is the basic attacks now reduce the cooldown of his Q by half a second against monsters and a second against champions. The other thing is that it now grants movement speed per stack up to 3 stacks, so you can kind of glue onto your enemy. The final thing is that his Impale, his ultimate, is going to consume stacks of Crystal Venom on them to do damage, and the cooldown is down as well. Now honestly, these changes are a little bit odd. They kind of have juggled his damage about, and it's hard to understand whether he's actually going to do more damage or less. Now they've reduced the damage on his Q and his E, but they've added damage onto his ultimate, and his passive when he gets the 3 stacks is going to be good for ganking and dueling people. The other thing that makes this difficult to understand is that his Q does less damage, but because the cooldown's going to be reduced now, it means that he'll get more Qs off, but they'll each be doing less damage. Now this is good for fighting someone, but it's not really good for jungle clearing, because it means that sure, it'll be quicker, but it's going to be way more mana intensive because you'll be using more of your Qs. Overall, I don't really think this is going to make him a really popular pick, but he's still definitely viable if you build a bit of damage like Iceborne Gauntlet. Now next up we have everyone's favourite stone gargoyle. I guess that sounded way better in my head, but he's now getting a magic resist per level, which is pretty good because honestly he's the anti-mage. He's really good against characters like LeBlanc, who's obviously ripped this patch, but she's good against other people like Ziggs or Oriana to some extent as well. So we may be seeing Galio come back, and I really hope so because I love playing Galio. So there is a minor buff to Gragas' patch as well. When you're channeling your W, if you get interrupted by anything like a silence or a stun or a knockback or anything like that, you won't lose the damage reduction when it's interrupted. Now this is pretty good for bot lane because there are plenty of supports with CC, and normally you're using your W as you're walking towards someone. So imagine you're drinking, you get flayed backwards. Before you would have taken more damage, whereas now you're not going to. So next up we have a change to LeBlanc, and actually I really like how they're approaching this. Now LeBlanc has to one-shot someone or have very high damage to take them out of the fight, because otherwise she doesn't really do anything. Like, that is her job. Now they haven't really touched her damage, which means that she's still going to be a very potent threat, but what they have done is they've removed the silence from her Q. Now this is going to mean that people can flash away from her, they can heal, they can barrier, they can Zhonya's, and it's going to make it much harder for LeBlanc to actually kill someone and kind of introduce a lot more counterplay to her. Alright, so next up we have Lucian, and everyone knew this was coming. Finally Lucian, you got your nerf, and I don't really think it's going to do anything. They are halving the ratio on his W, which is a kind of big hit for his poke side, but his overall damage and dual potential isn't really going to be that affected. Like, I rarely ever kill someone just because of my W late game, and so I don't really think that this is going to have too much of an effect, but honestly, it's more the item changes that are going to affect him. So there are quite a few AD carry changes this patch, and the next one we're going to look at is for Sivir. Now Sivir's base mana is going up, her mana per level is going up, and her mana regen per level is going up as well. Now it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realise that they figured out Sivir has quite bad mana problems in lane, and this is going some way to trying to fix them. So the last two changes we have are to Tristana and to Twitch, and Tristana's going to be up first. So they've reduced the mana cost on her W, and they've kind of hinted that it's going to be able to jump walls easier and you're less likely to fail it, which I guess is a plus as well. The biggest thing for me though, and the thing that people aren't picking up on, which is really good, is that her R now scales with her passive range. Now this change was brought in for her E, for her RAS, and that change actually kind of brought Tristana back into the meta. Now imagine late game when you have this huge range and someone is charging at you, you can fire them backwards from really far away. I really like this change, and combined with the items that I'm going to talk about later, I actually think Tristana is going to come back into the meta pretty soon, and she's going to be a very strong AD carry. Now finally, everyone's favourite rat is getting a nerf this patch, and they're going to hit his passive and his Q. Now the passive is kind of warranted, I understand that. I think that the reduced damage is probably warranted, but the Q is really heavy handed. Now time to stealth without taking damage is slightly up, that's fair enough, I understand that, but what is very harsh is the maximum time to stealth while taking damage has been doubled to 6 seconds. Now Twitch doesn't have an escape, but before you could kind of use your Q to run away if you're getting attacked and kind of survive those 3 seconds, but that's no longer going to be viable at all. You can't run away while stealth because you're absolutely screwed. Now I understand that Twitch was very strong and they had to tweak it in some way, but I would rather they hit his early damage in lane, which is kind of where I think his problems stem from, rather than the fact that late game now you can never get away from your attackers. So next up we have the new AD carry item changes, and for the sake of time I'm not going to go through all of the changes themselves. I'm just going to show you them on screen, and I'm going to talk about what they actually mean. So there's a new item called the Essence Reaver. Doran's Blade now gives you lifesteal, and other lifesteal items have been reduced. Bloodthirster has been completely reworked with a new passive, and Infinity Edge now has more base AD on it. Attack speed is cheaper and grants more attack speed on the component parts like Zil and Berserker Greaves, and finally Yumu's is now more tailored towards AD carries as well. So what is this actually going to mean going forward from today? So Dorans are going to be your source of lifesteal early. You're going to want to pick 1 or 2 up in your lane probably instead of a Vamp Scepter if you're going for an Infinity Edge or a Triforce. Now because of the Zil buff, it now costs less gold and it gives you more attack speed, meaning that it's actually really cost efficient. And if you buy a BT or Infinity Edge first item, then you're almost always going to want to get your Zil next. Now Infinity Edge and Triforce can be bought first with a few Dorans for lifesteal, which is kind of what I hinted at earlier. Now Bloodthirster makes you harder to kill and very good at 1v1s. It means that if your opponent has an Infinity Edge and you have a Bloodthirster, you'll probably win that 1v1, but you probably won't win 2v2s and you won't do as much damage in teamfights. Now this is obviously my opinion, and I recommend that you try this out for yourself, but in my opinion this is going to be the core build on many AD carries now. Now double Dorans is going to give you the lifesteal that you need in lane, and then you can get an Infinity Edge first item and a Blade the Ruin King second, and that gives you good mid game, it gives you good late game, and it gives you good dual potential as well. Now this is what I meant earlier about Tristana coming back into the meta. Like, this is the build that Tristana used to run when she was very popular. So I expect her to come back with her buffs, and the combination of this build being very good, I think she's going to come back into the meta. Now, as you can see, I've put a little thing here with Essence Reaver that if it becomes a core item on most AD carries, I will actually lick my shoe on stream because it's such a noob trap. Now, what I mean by that is that it looks good on paper, but AD carry itemization is all about maximizing your efficiency for the 6 slots that you have. You only have 6 slots, and you're probably going to be earning the most gold in the game from late game. So what that means is you want expensive items that maximize your damage over those 6 items. Now, if you have one item, this Essence Reaver, that's pretty cheap, and it's only 2,500 gold, to put that into perspective, that's about the price of a Phantom Dancer, you don't really get that many combat stats. You get some mana regen, you get some lifesteal, and some cooldown reduction. Now, lifesteal you already get from Doran's Blades. Now, the cooldown reduction you don't really need on AD carries, so the only thing you're really getting from this is the AD, and I don't think that's really worth it. Now finally, the Randuin's nerf is the only other thing I want to mention this video, because it's actually going to mean that ADs are easier to kite with, and tanks won't be able to give you those unwanted hugs as early, so they won't be able to jump on you kind of after they rush the Randuins and shut you down completely. So the last 2 things I want to talk about are the teleport and the heal change. Now when it gets to a point where everyone takes the same summoner spell like teleport and it's seen as a disadvantage to not take it, then they normally nerf it. So this was kind of expected for the TP. Now the heal change is what I want to talk about, because in bot lane this now means that it's probably going to be better to have this on your support and then have barrier on your AD. Now yes, this does sound strange, but what it means is that you actually get double defensive summoners. So if you're running a lane like Vayne or Twitch and you just want to survive, then having the heal on the support and having barrier on you is actually really viable. So thanks for watching this video guys, and I'm sorry I didn't cover every change, but if you have questions about specific things that I did not mention, then please leave them below and I will hang out in the comments tonight and answer all your questions. Thank you for watching the video, and I'll be releasing a vlog about LCS London and I will be there to meet all of you guys, so enjoy your day and I'll catch you in my next video.